everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Amy and I have PTSD. Before we go into it, I just want to say that my eyes might look a bit strange, and that's because I have conjunctivitis. So we are just going to pretend that that's not happening because it's been going on for over a week and it's really frustrating. But my chair's squeaky. Today we're here to talk about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and my experience being diagnosed with it. Now, I want to make it very clear that I am not a doctor or a medical professional. I am merely a patient. So none of this is meant to be medical advice, and there we have it. Let's continue. If you want to see more videos like this, please click the subscribe button and the bell, and do give this video a thumbs up if you find it helpful. Okay, so what is PTSD? PTSD stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. The NHS description of PTSD is: post-traumatic stress disorder is an anxiety disorder caused by very stressful, frightening or distressing events. Causes of PTSD can include serious road accidents, violent personal assaults, serious health problems or childbirth experiences. Obviously that doesn't include every single experience, but those are some. PTSD can develop straight after an event or later on. You can start having symptoms, and symptoms of PTSD include reliving traumatic events through nightmares or flashbacks, feelings of isolation, guilt, irritability and anxiety, problems sleeping such as insomnia or sleeping too much or finding it difficult to stay asleep, difficulty concentrating, and all of these symptoms interfere with the person's day-to-day life in some way. Every person is different, and so there are other symptoms that might crop up because of PTSD, but this is kind of the main description of it. PTSD is estimated to affect 1 in 3 people who experience a traumatic event. Did I suspect I had PTSD before I was diagnosed with it? No, I did not. I thought that a lot of experiences that I had had, and I'll get onto those, were traumatic, but I never thought that I could really use that word. I thought that people would think I was being dramatic if I said that something was traumatic or that I had experienced trauma again and again. And in terms of PTSD, I was under the assumption that PTSD was only diagnosed for people who had been to war or something like that, and that was it, and that I could not be diagnosed with PTSD, and that saying that I thought I had PTSD would make me look ridiculous. And so it was a bit of a shock, but also a huge relief when I was finally diagnosed. The idea that PTSD is only reserved for people who have gone to war is a really common one, and I think that as time goes on, we're learning more about it. We are, younger generations are more aware of their mental health, more aware of the resources that are out there to help them. And so we're learning more about it just ourselves, not just medical professionals, but the general population. But yeah, I mean, the whole thing of it just being for war, for soldiers, was definitely something that struck me, and I know is a thing that a lot of people think of. But as I said, with the NHS definition and the possible causes, there are a lot of different causes, like childbirth. So it's something really important, I think, to talk about, which is why I wanted to make this video, actually, was to kind of raise awareness of PTSD for people who think that they have experienced traumatic event, think that they might be suffering from PTSD, but think that they can't because they didn't go to war or something. So that brings me to the diagnosis. So at the time, I was having therapy for depression and generalised anxiety disorder. Those were 2 things that I had been diagnosed with a long time before and impact my everyday life. I was having high intensity CBT and talk therapy. CBT is cognitive behavioural therapy, which is designed to help you learn coping strategies to deal with whatever it is you're there for, so depression, anxiety, whatever it is. So I was having combined intensive CBT and counselling or talk therapy. And through that, we were talking about my health conditions, because that is what causes the majority of my anxiety and depression. And we were talking about some of the times that have been the worst for me and the pain that I've experienced, how I felt in those moments, and that it has happened so many times. And we were discussing what happens if I start to feel a bit of pain. And I was talking about how if I start to get a bit of stomach pain, immediately I begin to panic and I start reliving the experiences that I've had in the past where I've been in excruciating pain and in effect thinking that I'm going to die. I was asked, do you think that these events were traumatic for you? And I said, well, I mean, yeah, I do, but I'd never say that like I have experienced trauma, because that's just for people who've been to war. And I was told that an event that makes you fear for your life is traumatic. And I sort of sat there and thought, well, I've had a lot of those. And that's when the diagnosis of PTSD was kind of first brought up and discussed with me, and it was a relief to have someone say, yes, I agree with what you're thinking, even though I hadn't said that's what I was thinking. Them kind of confirming that yes, these events were traumatic and yes, they are having an effect on your life. It was a relief to have that and to know that this was real and I wasn't, being over dramatic or something, and that these events that happened were very traumatic for me, even though once they had happened, I just had to get on with life as usual. I didn't usually have time to process what had happened. It was very much like, well, you're okay now, let's just pretend that didn't happen. And that certainly was not helpful for me at all. And that's definitely something that I've learned throughout this whole process, is that if something happens to you and you feel like you need to cry about it or you feel the need to talk about it, that is all you processing everything. And when I was younger, when I had these traumatic health experiences, I would try and talk about it and I'd be told, oh, don't talk about it now, it's over now. And that was obviously with the best of intentions, but it certainly did not help, because then I wasn't able to process that, and that kind of all feeds into the PTSD that I'm now diagnosed with. For me, I have experienced lots of health or medical trauma. So this is to do with my bile acid malabsorption, which I've spoken about in a couple of other videos, also my Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and my other symptoms that are still not diagnosed and continue to get worse. I've been in situations where, whether I'm at home or in public, I have been unable to move because I'm in so much pain. I can't stop the pain. I am panicking. I feel like I'm dying. I feel like I'm going to die because the pain is so bad. And with that, there has also been years and years and years of trying to find out what was going on with me, what was wrong with me physically, and being turned away a lot, being told there's nothing wrong with you, a lot of dismissal, which then also fed into all of this trauma that I was experiencing, because it wasn't being, it was sort of being disregarded as if it was nothing, and that made me feel that, am I being dramatic about this? Like, I thought I was dying. This was the most horrendous pain I've ever been in, many, many times, but I'm being told that it's nothing. So all of that kind of came together, and that led to my diagnosis of PTSD. Sorry, that's probably so annoying that I'm doing that. One thing for me with PTSD is that, as I said, if I start to get a pain that I feel like might turn into excruciating pain, and the situations I've been in before, I begin to panic and start to flash back to times before when that's happened. And so I'll be sitting there and it's almost like I'm there again, like I'm back when it's happened before, when the pain has been so bad no one's been able to stop it. And so even though the pain isn't as bad in the present, I'm in the past now. I am not in the present anymore. I am in the past. I am experiencing it all again. So in the present, I'm getting really, really panicked and just so overwhelmed because I'm experiencing this again. And then in the present, that obviously doesn't help with any of the physical pain, whether it's going to get to that excruciating point or not, which sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. I am already in that place, experiencing it again and again and again, and it feels just the same as it did then. I start feeling all of the dread, all of the fear for my life, and also some of the physical pain. I start feeling that too. And I just feel so helpless and terrified, and it's awful. It's horrible. So as well as the kind of flashbacks, reliving those events, I also just constantly am thinking about what if that happens again, because it was so terrifying, obviously, and it's happened quite a lot of times. So in my mind, I'm not able to say, well, you know, that was a one-off, that's not going to happen again. This has happened to me many, many, many times where I feel like I am dying because I am in so much pain. And so I can't just say to myself, well, it's not going to happen again, because I know that's probably not true. So whenever I go anywhere, I'm always thinking about, okay, if it happens here, what will I do? And if this happens, what will I do? And what is my backup plan? Who will I be able to call if I'm unwell and I can't drive? Will I call an ambulance, or will I ask someone to take me to hospital this time? Or just thinking about these things over and over and over again, making sure I have all these different medications in my bag in case I need them. And just, it's a lot. It is a huge mental load before I even get out of the door in the morning. So it's a lot of stress in post-traumatic stress disorder. So what now? So I was diagnosed about 3 years ago, something like that. And it must have been 3 years ago. Anyway, you don't care about that. I was diagnosed about 3 years ago, and since then I have gone back for therapy a few times when I feel like my anxiety and my PTSD are getting difficult and I need some help with them. But what I have got are grounding techniques. So grounding techniques are part of cognitive behavioural therapy, and these are ways to help bring you back to the present. So these are especially good for me if I am having a flashback, or I am getting really, really panicked, thinking about what if. And the grounding techniques just help to ground me, to bring me back to where I am right now. So one of my favourite ones to do is the 5 senses. So if I'm having that flashback and I feel like I'm there, someone else will say to me, okay, tell me 5 things you can see in my actual physical space, not in my flashback. So I have to focus on what I can see. And then 4 things I can hear, 3 things I can touch, 2 things I can smell, and 1 thing I can taste. And all of those things help my brain realise that my senses are sensing things in the here and now, not in the past. I'm in this space right now. And they also help me to regulate my breathing a bit, because I'm having to talk and think, and that just helps to bring the panic down a bit as well, because if I'm in physical pain and I'm panicking, that worsens the physical pain for me, and then I panic more, and then the physical pain gets worse because I'm panicking more, because I'm not able to focus my attention on the physical pain because I'm panicking so much. So that grounding technique really helps me. Stay hydrated, kids. One task that one of the therapists got me to do was to write about one of the most horrific experiences I've ever had, where I thought I was going to die, and write it all down as if I'm there, so as if I'm having the flashback, which was very, very difficult to do. I had to really... It was hard. It was hard to write that down, relive it, but I was controlling the fact that I was reliving it, so I suppose that made it less likely that I would panic over it. So I wrote that down, and then I had to read it to the therapist, and that was very hard, really hard to read how I'm feeling at that time and go back to that. But the fact that I had written it down, I had read it to myself a few times, which is what I was supposed to do, and then shared it with my therapist, meant that I was giving it less power. I was taking away the power from it, because I was reliving or retelling from start to finish. So with flashbacks, a lot of the time you're just getting the worst parts, and it might be in order or it might be a bit out of order. So this was from the beginning, before the event started, all the way to the end after the event has finished. And so I get to talk it through from start to finish, which I don't get to do if I'm having the flashback. And so that really stripped away some of the power of it. And that was very enlightening. And even though I really, really hated doing this exercise, writing it all down, having to think about it, it was a really helpful exercise. And so if you are wondering if that's something that you could do, I would definitely say you need a safe person to be able to do this with, such as a therapist. And it might be something to think about if you're talking to a therapist and you feel like that's something that you would like to do. I would definitely recommend grounding techniques and CBT and therapy. I know therapy isn't for everyone, but I am a huge advocate of therapy, and I think that it's just incredible how therapists manage to bring things out of you that you didn't even know were there. They ask the right questions to make you realise things that you had no idea about, or you did but you didn't know you did. So they'll ask you a question and you'll answer it, and while you're answering it you're thinking, oh my goodness, I didn't even realise this, but yes, this makes so much sense. My experience with PTSD has certainly improved since I got my diagnosis, sought therapy. I was already on medication for depression and anxiety, so I think that's the kind of the same stuff they would put me on anyway for PTSD. But having the grounding techniques, understanding it more. I said when I first started therapy that what I really wanted to do was just understand where my anxiety was coming from. So understanding it and also having it validated, being told, yes, you have experienced trauma, you have experienced several traumatic events, and yes, this has led to PTSD. That was really important for me, I think, in knowing that what I was feeling was real. And I mean, I've managed to make this whole video about it without having a breakdown, so I think that's really good. I mean, I'm sure you've seen that there have been some pauses and things because it is difficult to talk about, but for me, I find that talking about things, the more I do it, the easier it becomes. And that's why I like to make videos like this on this channel, because it's good therapy for me, but it's also helpful, I hope, for other people watching. a lot of the time with things like this, you feel completely alone, and if I can be your person on the internet who helps you feel a little bit less alone, then I'll be very happy with that. If you do have any questions about my experience with PTSD, then please do leave them in the comments section down below. If you have experienced PTSD and you are willing to share something that you've learnt or something that has helped you, then please do in the comments down below. No pressure at all. This is a very personal experience. And I will also leave in the description box down below some resources so that if you want to learn more about PTSD, or if you are thinking about getting some help for your own PTSD or anxiety or depression, I will leave some links down below where you can find out more information to do so. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful to at least one person. That's all I ever care about, is just helping at least one person. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.